it's a big deal. This is really a big deal. It's hard to downplay how serious this really is, because it's not just Muslims they're going after. It's not just immigrants they're going after. They're going after all of us. When the government starts to consider everybody a suspect, that's a real problem. That's a real problem. Our civil liberties are at risk. Our freedom of speech is at risk. Our freedom to worship is at risk. And our right to privacy is at risk. My name's David Goodner. I'm a 29-year-old member of the Des Moines Catholic Worker. I graduated from the University of Iowa in May of 2009 with a degree in human rights. Most of my time at the university I was spent as a campus anti-war organizer with the University of Iowa Anti-War Committee. And we found out a couple weeks ago that the FBI had opened up a 9-month criminal investigation of our student anti-war group and some affiliated organizations down in Iowa City. They staked out our homes, followed us to class, followed us to our places of employment. They went through our trash. They had an undercover informant infiltrate our organization. He wore a wire to all the meetings, so all of our public meetings were, there's audio and video equipment of all of our meetings, and they basically just followed us around. It looks like several hundred hours of in-person surveillance by the special agents of the FBI and local law enforcement, and they claimed that they were looking for criminal activity and links to violent terrorist groups. So we caught wind of it a while ago, and I put in, on September 2nd, 2008, I put in a Freedom of Information Act request with the FBI, and basically 2 years to the day that I put in that request, I got about 300 pages of heavily redacted Freedom of Information Act documents from the FBI that clearly outlined exactly what the extent of the FBI's involvement was and kind of the breadth of their surveillance. George Orwell himself would have a harder time writing a story this ludicrous. I mean, it's really ridiculous. They followed us, again, they staked out our homes, they followed us to class. When we went grocery shopping at the New Pioneer Co-op or went to the Red Avocado, which is a vegan restaurant, they followed us around to the bars. Like if we went to the Mill restaurant after, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's crazy. It's really crazy, and on Monday there was a report released by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice that found between 2001 and 2006 the FBI had a very troubling pattern of conflating nonviolent civil disobedience with domestic terrorism. And what we're seeing is that extended well past 2006, because this surveillance all occurred in 2008, and it's the exact same thing. These wide-ranging criminal investigations on peace and justice organizations engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience. The FBI is considering this to be at least a possible terrorist threat, and is investing hundreds of hours of manpower into these investigations. As long as one of us is under surveillance, as long as one of us is at risk, all of us are. And this country was founded on individual freedom, individual liberty, the right to speak our minds, the right to challenge the policies of our own government, and also the right to privacy. And those rights don't mean anything anymore when the FBI can go and do this to above ground peace organizers. And so I think it's really something that everybody should be concerned about, because it's something that affects all of us. An injustice to one is an injustice to all. The Catholic worker movement itself, between 2001 and 2006, was investigated in Norfolk, Virginia, in Ithaca, New York, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and in Omaha, Nebraska, at Offutt Air Force Base, where members of both the Nebraska Catholic Worker and the Des Moines Catholic Worker have been organizing protests for decades. And so there's a lot of questions about, we've known that the FBI has been spying on Muslims for a long time, but they're spying on Catholics too. And so there's a lot of freedom of religion questions that are being brought up with this investigation as well. Even people they're going after people on the right too, that I may disagree with their political beliefs, but the FBI does not necessarily need to be spying on some of these Tea Party folks. And I think it raises a lot of really troubling questions. Number one is that does the First and Fourth Amendment mean anything anymore? Because basically we were surveilled for engaging in First Amendment constitutionally protected activities. And say what you want about nonviolent civil disobedience, but the idea that nonviolent civil disobedience is somehow a domestic terrorist threat or a threat to national security is so ridiculous and so ludicrous. But on top of that, it's also an extreme waste of money that could be used, one, to investigate legitimate terrorist threats, and two, it could be used to provide, single-payer health care for all Americans, affordable housing, to put people back to work with green energy jobs and sustainable development schemes and things like that. It's just messed up. All around the board, it's messed up. And the taxpayer footed the bill. All the way down the line, the taxpayer footed the bill, and it's really a crime against the taxpayer and a crime against the American people. Hopefully that we'll have an informed public debate about this, because there's a lot of questions that need answers. The Obama administration, if they can't close Guantanamo Bay, they're not going to repeal the Patriot Act. And what we're seeing is that the FBI is engaging in the same criminal methods that it has engaged in since the 1960s with COINTELPRO. They're intentionally trying to disrupt nonviolent, anti-war, peace, social justice, and like-minded organizations, and are somehow confusing those types of groups with legitimate terrorist threats. And I think it's really troubling because, again, it takes away from the real hunt for real terrorists, if there is such a thing. That's an open question as well. And then it's also just a horrible waste of taxpayer money, and it's unconstitutional, and it's probably illegal. Well, I think the biggest threat that this is to the average American citizen is, number one, it's using our money. It's our taxpayer money that's going for this type of activity, and that's money that could be better spent providing for unmet social needs. But second of all, as long as one of us is under surveillance, as long as one of us is at risk, all of us are. And this country was founded on individual freedom, individual liberty, the right to speak our minds, the right to challenge the policies of our own government, and also the right to privacy. And those rights don't mean anything anymore when the FBI can go and do this to above-ground peace organizers. And so I think it's really something that everybody should be concerned about, because it's something that affects all of us. An injustice to one is an injustice to all. Well, so that's the other thing, is this is not the first time that the FBI has been spying on activists in the state of Iowa. Back in 2004, folks, again, with the Catholic Worker, with other peace and justice organizations in Des Moines, were the subject, the National Lawyers Guild,
Catholic Peace Ministry.
The Catholic Peace Ministry, yeah, have all been targets of this surveillance, and it's been for tried and true nonviolent methods of protest, of peace organizing, that have been responsible for the social change that we've had in this country. Some people are worried that this could have a chilling effect on dissent. If people feel like the FBI might be watching them, they might be less likely to engage in First Amendment protected activities, such as speaking out, such as speaking truth to power and calling out the government for the atrocities that they commit in our name overseas every day. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. We have to look at this as a struggle for what's right. And the only way that we're going to be able to hold the government accountable and make changes is to organize and to use this as a tool to further our own organizations, to build our own community power, and to fight back with the legitimate nonviolent tools that we have at our disposal. And that means we need to continue to build a grassroots movement that's powerful enough to make the kind of changes that we want, so that we have a more just and democratic society. Who are the real criminals here? Because it's not the pacifists. It's not the pacifists. It's not the folks that are working day in and day out for a better world. It's really, the FBI sometimes seems like they're more of a criminal than the people that they're claiming to investigate. And I think that raises a lot of serious questions. It's really troubling.